The waiter's hands shook as he set down the plate. June 10th, 1963. Small's Paradise, Table 7. Everyone in the restaurant knew what was happening. The ribs were still steaming, glazed with sauce, arranged perfectly on white china. But nobody was thinking about the food. They were thinking about the man being forced to eat it. Marcus "Smooth" Henderson sat across from Bumpy Johnson, shaking so badly he could barely hold his fork. Sweat ran down his face despite the air conditioning. His cream-colored suit, which had cost $400 that morning, was already soaked through. "Eat," Bumpy said quietly. His voice carried across the silent restaurant. 250 people frozen in place, watching, waiting, because everyone understood what a last meal meant, and everyone knew that what came after would be something they'd never forget. This is the story of the night Bumpy Johnson turned justice into theater. The night he showed an entire neighborhood what happens when you betray a king. The night witnesses fled Small's Paradise rather than watch what came next. Not because of what Bumpy did, but because of how he did it. With honor, with ritual, with the cold, calculated precision of a man who understood that revenge isn't just about punishment. It's about sending a message that lasts forever. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand who Marcus Henderson had been. Not the terrified man sitting at table 7, but the man he'd been for 11 years while Bumpy rotted in Alcatraz. Marcus "Smooth" Henderson, 38 years old. Every Tuesday and Friday night, he held court at Small's Paradise, the crown jewel of black nightlife in Harlem. Table 7. Always table 7. The back corner where you could see the entire restaurant, but nobody could sneak up behind you. Smooth wore Italian suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Drove a midnight blue Cadillac Eldorado. Had a penthouse apartment in Mount Morris Park with a view that stretched all the way to Central Park. He had 40 men on his payroll, 5 policy banks running numbers across Harlem, and the Genovese family's blessing to operate as long as he paid his weekly tribute. All of it built on Bumpy Johnson's foundation. The connections Bumpy had made, the infrastructure Bumpy had built, the respect Bumpy had earned. Smooth had taken everything and claimed it as his own. For 11 years, Smooth had slept peacefully, lived like a king, convinced himself that Bumpy was never coming back, that Alcatraz had finally broken the unbreakable man, that Harlem was his now, until June 7th, 1963. That was the day Bumpy walked out of Alcatraz carrying everything he owned in a paper bag. 56 years old. Gray in his hair now. 11 years older. But those eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, still had that stillness that made strong men nervous. Bumpy didn't go home when he arrived in New York, didn't embrace his wife, Mamie, didn't stop to rest after the 3-day train ride from San Francisco. He went straight to Junie Bird's apartment on 145th Street. "Give me names," Bumpy said, not even sitting down. Junie Bird had been waiting 11 years for this moment. He was 63 now, gray-haired, but loyal to his last breath. He rattled off 15 names, men who'd gotten rich while Bumpy was locked away, men who'd carved up his territory like he was never coming back. But one name made Bumpy's jaw tighten. Marcus Henderson. Smooth had been Bumpy's protege, a sharp young hustler from 118th Street that Bumpy had taken under his wing in 1947. Bumpy taught him the numbers game, showed him how to run policy banks, introduced him to the right people, protected him when Dutch Schultz's old crew came for revenge. When Bumpy got arrested in 1952, he trusted Smooth to hold things together, take care of the organization, send money to Mamie. For 2 years, Smooth did exactly that. Then the money stopped. The letters stopped. And according to Junie, Smooth had made a deal with Vito Genovese. He'd given up the locations of Bumpy's policy banks, told them which cops were on Bumpy's payroll, revealed where the cash houses were, In exchange, the Italians let Smooth keep 125th Street for himself. Bumpy had spent 11 years in Alcatraz thinking about that betrayal. 11 years planning what came next. "Where does he eat?" Bumpy asked. "Small's Paradise," Junie said. "Every Friday night, table 7, shows up at 9 o'clock like clockwork." Bumpy looked at his watch. It was Friday, 6 o'clock in the evening. "Get me a table right next to his." At 8:45, Small's Paradise was filling up. The weekend crowd arriving. Hustlers in sharp suits, musicians between sets, working folks spending their paychecks on good food and cold beer. The three-piece jazz combo warming up in the corner. Waiters moving between tables with trays of fried chicken, collard greens, and cornbread. The place smelled like home, like celebration, like Friday night in Harlem. Then Bumpy Johnson walked in. 8:50. He was wearing the same suit he'd worn on the train from California. A charcoal gray number that had seen better days. His shoes were scuffed. He carried no weapon that anyone could see. He looked like a ghost, like something from Harlem's past walking into its present. The restaurant didn't go silent, but conversations shifted. Eyes tracked him as he moved through the crowd. Old-timers recognized him immediately. Younger hustlers who'd only heard the stories whispered to each other. "That's Bumpy Johnson." "I thought he was dead. Man got out of Alcatraz 3 days ago." Bumpy walked straight to table 8, right next to table 7. Junie Bird was already sitting there, along with Willie Fish Jackson and Raymond Quick Lewis. 3 old-timers who'd stayed loyal. 3 men who remembered what Harlem was like when Bumpy ran it. Bumpy sat down with his back to the wall, facing the entrance. Old habit. Never sit with your back to the door. At exactly 9 o'clock, Marcus Smooth Henderson walked in. He was dressed in a cream-colored suit with a burgundy tie, diamond rings on 3 fingers, gold watch that caught the light. He had 4 men with him, bodyguards who looked like they'd never missed a meal. Smooth was laughing about something, holding court, acting like he owned the place. He did own the place, or at least he owned the protection that kept Small's Paradise operating without police raids. Smooth's crew headed for table 7. That's when Smooth saw Bumpy. He stopped mid-step. The blood drained from his face like someone had opened a valve. His bodyguards noticed the change and followed his gaze. When they saw Bumpy Johnson sitting there, calm as Sunday morning, their hands moved toward their waistbands. Bumpy didn't move, didn't react, just looked at Smooth with those cold, empty eyes. "Marcus," Bumpy said quietly, but his voice carried across the restaurant like a gunshot. "Come sit with me." It wasn't a request. Smooth's bodyguards tensed. One of them, a thick-necked enforcer named Leon, stepped forward. "Mr. Henderson don't take meetings without—" Junie Bird stood up. He was 63 and looked harmless, but the .45 automatic in his hand looked very serious. "The man said sit down," Junie said softly. Suddenly, guns were everywhere. Smooth's 4 bodyguards had their hands inside their jackets. Junie had his .45. Willie Jackson produced a sawed-off shotgun from under the table. Quick Lewis had a revolver pointed at Leon's chest. The restaurant froze. The jazz combo stopped playing mid-note. Waiters backed toward the kitchen. Customers dove under tables. But Bumpy Johnson didn't even blink. "Tell your boys to go home, Marcus," Bumpy said. "This conversation is between you and me." Smooth's mouth opened and closed like a fish. His hands were shaking. He looked at his bodyguards, looked at the guns, looked at Bumpy's calm, terrifying face. "Go," Smooth whispered to his crew. "Boss," Leon started. "I said go." The bodyguards backed toward the door, hands still on their weapons, eyes locked on Junie's .45. They didn't want to leave, but they also didn't want to die in Small's Paradise on a Friday night. When they were gone, Bumpy gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit." Marcus Henderson sat. The restaurant was dead silent now. 250 people frozen in place, watching table 8 like it was a stage. Even the kitchen staff had stopped cooking. Everyone knew what was happening. Everyone knew this was history. Bumpy signaled a waiter. The young man approached nervously, avoiding eye contact. "Bring us a plate of ribs," Bumpy said. "The good ones, and 2 glasses of bourbon." The waiter practically ran to the kitchen. The silence stretched. Smooth sat there, hands in his lap, not knowing where to look. Not at Bumpy's eyes. Those were too terrifying. Not at the other patrons. They were all staring. So he looked at the table, at the wood grain, at nothing. The food arrived. The waiter set down a full plate of ribs, still steaming, glazed with sauce. 2 glasses of bourbon. Then he disappeared. Bumpy pushed the plate toward Smooth. "Eat." Smooth stared at the ribs like they were poisoned. "I'm not hungry, Bumpy. Listen, I can explain." "Eat," Bumpy repeated. His hand moved to his waistband. "Because this is your last meal." That's when Smooth understood. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a conversation. This was an execution with an audience. "Bumpy, please." Smooth's voice cracked. "I had to survive. You were gone. The Italians were taking everything. I made a deal to save the organization." "You made a deal to save yourself," Bumpy said quietly. "You gave them my policy banks, my collectors, my roots. You told Genovese everything, and then you kept the money that should have gone to my wife." Tears were running down Smooth's face now. Actual tears. This man who'd ruled Harlem for 11 years, who'd had 40 men under his command, who'd lived like a king, was crying in front of everyone. "I was going to make it right. I swear I was waiting for you to come home. I've been home for 3 days, Marcus. You didn't come see me. Didn't send word. Didn't send money to Mamie to make up for 11 years of nothing." Bumpy leaned forward. "You thought I was never coming back. Thought you'd gotten away with it. Please, Bumpy, I'll give it all back. The money, the territory, everything." "I don't want it back from you," Bumpy said. "I'm taking it back from you. There's a difference." Bumpy's hand moved to his waistband again, but he didn't pull a gun. He pulled out a straight razor. The same razor he'd carried since 1935. The same one that had opened Dutch Schultz's enforcer from ear to ear in a Bronx warehouse. The same blade that had convinced Lucky Luciano to let Bumpy operate independently in Harlem. Bumpy unfolded the razor slowly. The steel caught the light. "You know what the Romans used to do to traitors?" Bumpy asked conversationally. "They'd make them eat their last meal. Then they'd execute them in public. Let everyone see what happens when you betray your emperor." Smooth was hyperventilating now, eyes locked on the razor. "I'm not a Roman emperor," Bumpy continued, "but I am Harlem." He raised his voice so every person in Small's Paradise could hear. "And everyone in this restaurant needs to understand something. When I went to Alcatraz, some of you forgot who built this, forgot whose streets these are, forgot that respect isn't something you take. It's something you earn." He looked directly at Smooth. Marcus Henderson forgot. So now Marcus Henderson is going to help me remind everyone. Bumpy stood up. Smooth tried to bolt, but Junie was behind him in a second, gun pressed against his spine. "Stand up," Bumpy ordered. Smooth stood. His legs were shaking so badly he could barely support himself. Bumpy walked around the table until he was face to face with the man who'd betrayed him. Then, with the entire restaurant watching, with 250 witnesses frozen in horror and fascination, Bumpy raised the razor to Smooth's throat. Not to kill, to mark. In one quick motion, Bumpy cut a thin line across Smooth's left cheek, not deep, just enough to scar. Just enough to make sure every person in Harlem would know Marcus Henderson as the man who betrayed Bumpy Johnson. Smooth screamed. Blood ran down his face. staining his cream-colored suit. The suit that had cost $400 that morning. The suit he'd bought with Bumpy's money. "That's so you remember," Bumpy said quietly. "Every time you look in a mirror, you'll see that scar, and every person who sees you will know what you did." That's when the witnesses started fleeing, not all at once, but in waves. First, the people sitting closest to table 8. They grabbed their coats and ran for the door. Then the people at the next tables, then more. Within 30 seconds, half the restaurant was empty. People pushing past each other, knocking over chairs, not because they were afraid Bumpy would hurt them, but because they just witnessed something that felt sacred and terrible at the same time. A public execution, a ritual, a coronation. Bumpy folded the razor and put it back in his pocket. He stood there in the middle of the exodus, calm as a stone in a river. "You've got 24 hours to leave Harlem," Bumpy said to Smooth. "Take whatever you can carry, leave the rest. If I see you after tomorrow night, I won't be this generous." He turned to address the remaining witnesses. Maybe 100 people now, the ones brave enough or curious enough to stay. The rest of you, Bumpy Johnson is back. The rules are the same as they always were. Pay what you owe. Keep your word. Protect your people. Anyone who wants to test me, you know where to find me. Bumpy Johnson walked out of Small's Paradise at 9:47 that night. He left Marcus Henderson bleeding at table 7. Left the half-eaten plate of ribs. Left witnesses who would spread the story across Harlem by morning. He walked out like a man who'd just finished a normal dinner. Like nothing unusual had happened. Like he'd simply reminded everyone of a fact they'd temporarily forgotten. By sunrise, every hustler, policy banker, and street soldier in Harlem knew the king was back. Marcus Smooth Henderson was on a bus to Philadelphia by noon the next day. He never returned. That scar became his brand. A permanent reminder visible to everyone he met for the rest of his life. People would see it and know. That's the man who betrayed Bumpy Johnson. Within 72 hours, 3 other men who'd carved up Bumpy's territory quietly disappeared from Harlem. Not killed, just gone. Relocated with a clear understanding. Stay away or join Smooth. The Genovese family, who'd moved into Harlem while Bumpy was locked up, sent a captain to negotiate. The meeting lasted 4 minutes. Bumpy's terms were simple. "You've got 2 weeks to pull out of Harlem. Everything north of 110th Street is mine again. Non-negotiable." The Italians left without arguing. They'd lost 3 soldiers trying to hold Bumpy's old territory in the past week. The cost of fighting him was higher than the profit. Within 6 months, every piece of Bumpy's empire was back under his control. Not through war, not through bloodshed, through fear, respect, and calculated power. But more than that, through theater. Because that's what the night at Small's Paradise really was. Theater. Bumpy could have killed Smooth quietly. Could have had him disappeared. Could have handled it the way gangsters usually handle betrayal. Quick, efficient, anonymous. Instead, he made it public. Made it ritual. Made it unforgettable. The last meal wasn't just about feeding a traitor. It was about showing respect even in punishment. About demonstrating that Bumpy Johnson operated by a code. That even betrayal would be met with a twisted kind of honor. The razor wasn't just about marking Smooth. It was about creating a walking reminder. Every person who saw that scar would remember the night at Small's Paradise. Would remember that Bumpy Johnson came back from Alcatraz and reclaimed his throne without firing a single shot. And the witnesses fleeing wasn't weakness. It was proof that what they'd seen was too powerful, too significant, too heavy to bear watching until the end. They fled because they'd witnessed something that felt like Old Testament justice. Biblical. Mythological. That's what made Bumpy Johnson different from other gangsters. He understood that power isn't just about violence. It's about symbolism. About creating moments that become legends. about making people remember not just what you did, but how you did it. The night at Small's Paradise became Harlem legend. Old-timers still talk about it, about how Bumpy didn't need an army, didn't need speeches. He walked into a restaurant, faced his betrayer, and with one razor and 250 witnesses, reminded everyone who really ran Harlem. You can lock a man up for 11 years. You can steal his money, take his territory, turn his people against him. But you can't take his throne, not if he's a real king, not if respect isn't just something he demands, but something he's earned through decades of keeping his word. Bumpy Johnson proved something that night that every leader should understand. Power isn't about who has the most guns. It's about who commands the most respect. And respect isn't given. It's earned through consistency, through codes, through the will to do what others won't when justice demands it. Marcus Henderson betrayed him for money. The Italians challenged him for territory. Every traitor thought Bumpy was finished, thought 11 years was long enough to erase a legacy. They all learned the same lesson. Bumpy Johnson doesn't make threats. He makes promises, and he keeps every single one. That's why they called him the Godfather of Harlem. Not because he was the most violent, not because he was the richest, because he understood something fundamental about power. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to be demonstrated once. Clearly, publicly, unforgettably. June 10th, 1963. The night Bumpy Johnson fed his enemy a last meal. The night witnesses fled rather than watch what came next. The night Harlem remembered who really wore the crown. If this story of ritual justice and calculated power moved you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you understand that real kings don't need armies. They need respect. Share this with someone who knows that betrayal always comes with a price, and that price is paid in front of witnesses. What would you have done in Bumpy's position? Would you have shown mercy or made an example? Let me know in the comments below.